So I think today we were really going to continue from last week, and sorry, not Nancy, it was Aisha. Aisha, please don't disappear on me because I hope you're going to ask me questions rather than be
That's
invisible.
okay. I'm here.
Yeah, because I gather today is meant to be more of a conversation than the other days, and so um, I think last night in bed I was hallucinating. Well, I like to think I was hallucinating. I was asleep anyway, but I was thinking about the ACTO online competencies, which I'll just flash up on the screen as a reminder from the other day. I must have been dreaming about this because I rewrote them in my head, and there were suddenly 24, and they were accompanied not only, this is visionary, by the way, on my part, not only were the 24 competencies, they were accompanied by proficiencies.
Ooh.
So, yeah, exactly. It's not quite the same thing, is it? This is all dream work, by the way. So you can see the link to ACTO here, and I've got it all up on the website to flash up and show you in a minute. But I'm just going to cancel that because I wanted to show you that ACTO has 10 competencies that we're expected to adhere to. And actually, I think built into that, there's a few more because they seem to cram together text-based communication and creativity, which are not the same thing at all. Anyway, we'll bypass on that. So I suddenly started, I'm not sure if I was awake or asleep at this point, started thinking about proficiency. Because you can know something and you can be competent at it. But so when I pass my driving test, technically the driving instructor tells me I'm competent to drive. But does that mean I'm proficient, for example, at driving at 70 miles an hour along the motorway, even though technically I'm competent to do so? I'm not sure what the nuance of the difference of these two words is, but I realized that actually there's some more work. The other part of my dream, I think it must have been in preparation for today, was that I decided that there needed to be 10 commandments for working online.
Ooh.
And I thought, sorry, this was a really bad dream, wasn't it? And so I decided that the first of these, I think I was awake at this point, should be where we were on Tuesday morning, which is that online presence is the most important first commandment. I'm still working on the other 9. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I think my 10 commandments may take a little longer. But that takes me back to where we started the other day about how creating online presence, creating that world, that invisible window, or that open window between myself as the therapist and you, in this case, shall we say, as the client, and how actually when you get drawn in to a conversation, when you go to a coffee shop and there's a wobbly table, you're distracted by the wobbly table, but if there's no wobbly table, you're just drawn into that conversation. You forget the whole world around you. And that's the same with our online therapy. We get drawn into that, and the window, that sort of like glass on the window with the slight film of dirt from outside and the pigeon shit and all the rest on the windows disappears, and it's like you're in the same room together, and you're just in a shared space, mentally, psychologically. You're in a shared space. Neville, I see you nodding a lot. You're recognizing some of this.
Yes. The talk that I did on Monday was about the proficiency stuff as well. So it's interesting that you're raising that term.
Oh, interesting. Oh, you must have been dreaming as well.
Oh, yes.
Like me. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, and this morning, as I had an hour spare, I started to do my emails. I didn't get very far because the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy sent me a survey about online work. They've been running an experimental training with the Open University. And it's been skilling people up with some essential skills. It's not a full training, but it's been giving some skills. And they were asking me, well, what was it like to work online? Well, of course, they got 1 hour of me going, because I fundamentally believe that you can't get these competencies and become proficient without a lot of training. And what I've got 20 diploma students at the moment. We've trained 300 to 500 students this year, I'd say. And they all come in thinking, oh, I know enough. All I need to do is turn on my camera. And they don't even know that they don't know. And this is the biggest problem in our profession. And by the end of the course, they go, oh my God, I've learned so much, and I can see how much more there is to learn, how exciting this online world is. And the biggest mistake that organizations make is, well, let's just adapt to working online and turn on the camera. And actually, if we're to do justice to the clients, we have to go a lot further than just turning on the camera. We have to, Adrian Rhodes said this, and I'm repeating a little bit of Tuesday, but Adrian Rhodes, who's the chair of ACTO and also was vice chair of UKCP, the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy, and is a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. So the most dyed-in-the-wool, sort of mainly opposed to online therapy because they think it all happens on the couch. Adrian, in one of his teaching sessions with us, said, actually, to get the best of your modality, you have to strip it back to the basics. You have to go back to school on it. And you don't just adapt. You've got to go back, work out what your modality is about, and then transform that actually for working online. I'm going to give you an example, and this is not in my PowerPoint at all, but it's quite a useful one. So I was supervising a CBT therapist who was working online for an online provider, we'll say. And the CBT therapist was a very experienced CBT therapist and taught CBT in a UK-based university. And they were doing a formulation and a model of CBT. Sorry, not my usual technical language, but you have to move yourself as a supervisor to where the supervisee is. So they were they brought to supervision that they'd been working with a client who had social anxiety phobia. Now, what you would do with in face-to-face in CBT with that is there's a couple of things you'd do. You'd film it, which is a whole nother can of worms. And you would also invite a colleague to come in. Now, this presupposes that you work for an organization. You bring a colleague in. Now, this therapist was working online and was working for a third party, so they weren't employed. So contractually, that's a real muddle. And many, many therapists working online are working in this way, which is why I'm bringing it up, because contractually, it's a mess. And none of the professional membership bodies pay nearly enough attention to how this is for these contracting therapists who just do hours for whether it's Anxiety UK, Dr. Julian, or any of the other many, Bupa, AXA, etc. Anyway, so this particular therapist, she said all this. And of course, she failed in terms of GDPR and privacy on both, because she just took her social phobia face-to-face model and did it online. So she filmed it. That failed the terms and conditions of that particular organization that she was contracted to for that client to deliver therapy, because they ban filming. So that was the first failure of a privacy and a failure to hold to a terms and conditions of the organ. And she hadn't read her contract. She hadn't done the work. She just thought, I'll just turn on my video and keep going. And the second was much more therapeutic and important, was that she brought in a colleague. Well, that failed on GDPR, which is our wonderful European data protection system. And actually, it's turning out to be a very good thing. I know we were already very scared about it when it came in. And I know that in Australia, you've got your own rules, but Australia has to sign up for GDPR because you trade with Europe. So to some extent, all the data protection rules all over the world link together, because certainly in online work, here we are working, you're all somewhere in Australia, and here I am in England. So whose jurisdiction are we in? If you were my clients, whose jurisdiction are we in at the moment, legally? Well, actually, we're in both, I think. And in my terms and conditions, I say that if there was ever a court case or some sort of complaint, it would have to be held within the England and Wales courts. That's what I put in my paperwork on the advice of my insurer. But it's really interesting. Anyway, so back to my client, my supervisee. So she brought in this client, this colleague. I don't think she asked the client if this was okay. And in terms of data breaches, this is a massive data breach. So we'll just put those data breaches aside and then go to the therapeutic part of it. Now, the idea with the social anxiety CBT formulation is that you gradually grade up and expose the patient, I hate the word, but you know, if we're in medical circles, it's a patient, to the social anxiety, so that they get more so they get more used to it, so to speak. That's the whole principle of it. So in face-to-face work, this is going to show you the advantages of an online work at the same time. In face-to-face work, you're either in the room or you're not in the room. It's as simple as that. I'm either seeing Neville, who's got social anxiety, or I'm not. I can't sit in the next door room and say, hey, Neville, how are you doing? Can we do this formulation now? That doesn't work. So you either are seeing the person or not. I suppose you could put a curtain between you, but that would be very false. So one of the advantages of online is that you can grade that up according to the level of anxiety and work with that. So instead of bringing in a colleague from next door, which would be not correct, what you could do is you could either start via working via email therapy or via live chat. So the video is off, the audio is off, we're on Zoom, but we're working via the chat facility. And this has a great advantage for the client because, and many clients tell me this, they love to reread those texts later on. They are gold for those clients. And they'll take the, you know, they'll save them and they'll go back through them over years and months to come. So you start via live chat or email. Both require quite a lot of training. This is not something you just do without practice. My students are just practicing at the moment and getting over their resistances, but they will be over their resistances by the time I finish training them, or else I'll be doing it again. No, I lie there. So with this client, I would have started via live chat and done the whole social anxiety CBT formulation via live chat, which is quite possible. It's, you know, copy and paste and a bit of typing in. And then when the client felt more comfortable about that, because shame is so often associated, and this is all about presence, which is the subject of what I'm meant to be talking about this week, because it's all about the client relationship. And if you don't have a relationship with your client, you're not going to achieve anything, whether it's CBT formulation or psychoanalytic. And so once you've got the client's confidence and they are feeling more comfortable in doing it in chat, you can say to them, well, how about thinking at some stage of moving up to audio? You choose. I always, where possible, leave it to the client. We say that the client should choose the formality, not the therapist. There's only one time when I say the therapist should override, well, there's two times. One, if there was a question of risk. And the second is if the therapist isn't competent and proficient to use live chat and email. In ACTO, we have 3 different levels of qualification now, 4 actually, including students. But at level 2, which is professional member, they only have to be skilled in 2 of the 4 generally taught formats, which is video, audio, live chat, and email are the 4. So most might be trained in video and audio, but would not be competent or proficient in live chat or email. There's also virtual reality and augmented reality, so using something like ProReal, and ProReal is a great way of working with clients. So back to this client, I would have if I'd seen the supervisee before she'd started working online, I said, can we go back to the basics of CBT and what CBT is about, and how could you convert this, not adapt, but transform your CBT modality for the long online format? Because actually, I think this is more suited to online than it is to face-to-face, because of the whole way you could do this graded exposure through coming in through email or live chat, followed by audio, and then eventually working up to video. And you don't even have to have the video on for the whole session. You can, have it on for 5 minutes and say, turn it off and say, was that okay? How did that go? So this is an example of using a modality in a completely different way online than face to face, and actually that particular example is better adapted to online than face to face. So I think there's an awful lot to think about in this, which is why I'm so concerned about the lack of training, which is why ACTO is so concerned about its competencies. It now has competencies for online supervisors, and I think poor online supervisors. So you think back to that case study I've just given you there, that supervisee case study. If I hadn't been an experienced online supervisor, would I ever have managed to cover all those bases? And the answer is probably no. Now, different supervisee situation came in, and a client who was at risk. And this was again through a third-party organisation that this therapist was working with, and the therapist supervisee was expressing a concern about a level of risk, and I said, well, where is the client? And this is a contracted NHS service, National Health Service client, and the therapist said the town. Let's say it was Woodbridge. I've no idea where the client actually was. I'll say Woodbridge, I think it's in Essex. And I said, are you sure the client is there? And the client said, well, she's a client from this NHS trust that's based in Woodbridge. I said, but where is the client? The client was in Bahrain. Now, let's say that the issue being covered was that the client's sexuality was in question. Do we know what the law is in Bahrain about being homosexual, gay? Do we know how secure working via video, audio, anything else in Bahrain is? And so you land up in a whole different silo of issues around risk management that seemed completely unimportant. If I hadn't been an online qualified supervisor, I'd have never picked that up, and that might have put that client at great risk. And I would have said to that supervisor, I don't think you should be working with this client online, because you never know what the robotic AI driven monitoring by the security services will be. So that's just a couple of little pointers really around who it's suitable to work with online or not. I'm just going to move forward on my slides from where I was last time. And I talked, Neville, I'm not sure if you were with us last time, but I talked last time about Lombard and Ditton. And if you're interested in this business of presence, it's a really old article. And Neville, do feel free to turn on your sound and talk to me about it. But it's a really old article by Lombard and Ditton. What it did, it made me think in a much richer way about the different types of presence. And I think this is really important for us as therapists. And I talked last time, and I got this idea of this open window from Lombard and Ditton. And then I talked about making sure your camera doesn't have a film on it, because so many people's camera has a film on it. And it's just so interesting, because actually when you fail to create that open window, whether it's an actual film on your camera or whether you just have a film between you, because that's what we are. We are just screens talking to screens at one level. But when we transport, we really do transport. And it is fascinating. This year, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is not coming from Australia. It's on at the moment in the UK, and is usually our winter summer fix. We have 3 weeks of getting the Australian sun, courtesy of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Somewhere in the Australian jungle, back. I think it's up somewhere near the Gold Coast. But so now it's coming from some castle in Wales. But as the weeks go by, we're drawn into it and into our relationship with these people and all their bug eating and awful drinking and all the tasks and chores they have to go through. And you start to identify with them. And I think it's really interesting because that's just a TV show, but they draw into our worlds and we draw into their worlds. And I remember going to a wedding in France. My neighbor in France, it was a farmer, is a farmer, and he went on. His wife had died. He was only 34 at the time. And his wife had died and he was miserable. And his daughter said, well, why don't you go on the French equivalent of Farmer Wants a Wife? It's a TV program. And Amour est dans le pré is the name of the French program. You can look it up. It's quite entertaining. Thierry Olive is his name if you want the real lowdown on it. Anyway, so Thierry went on this program. And for some reason, it was series 6 or 7, I think, some reason, he went into the hearts and minds with his awful story of the entire French nation. People tuned in even from England to watch it, got onto French TV and watched it. It was amazing how we were all drawn into his world. And then he met, through Farmer Wants a Wife, he met Annie, who was to be his future wife. And of course, I had always been very associated with the Olive family for a long time. And so I went to the wedding. There were 7,000 people at the wedding. The mayor of the local town was furious because there were so many people. They were hanging off the rooftops, literally. You couldn't get in the church. We had to be guarded to get into the church. But afterwards, and all the farmers from Amour dans le Pré came to the wedding. And they sat in the 2 front rows, and then we, family and friends, sat in the next 2 rows, and then everybody else was behind us, so to speak. But when we got to the wedding reception and we could then start to talk to everybody, it was really weird because we knew those farmers and they saw it and stayed amongst themselves. They didn't want to talk to anybody else at the wedding reception except for us. And this is part of this presence thing. We identified with them and had become their friends. I could tell you about each one of them and their wine growing activities or their horse stud activities or whatever it was, or their Pyrenean farm. I felt I knew those people. And this is part of the building of presence. So I wanted to just go back to that. Neville, do you recognize any of those sort of aspects?
That was like the beginning of the year. A lot's happened since then. I'm sorry.
A lot has happened since then, hasn't it? Yeah. And now here we are in our awful COVID situation. But I think people hang on to how we build this sense of presence. And so I'm really using that TV bit really as an example of how, if we understand the principles of how TV presenters build presence, we can learn from TV presenters about how to make it easy for our clients to feel their presence with us and us with them. That's really what that's about. It's not about building TV presence on its own. It's about the skills that I've learned a lot from photography, for example, about lines and things. So I'm not on a very well tidied up room today, as you can see, but I have just about got my lines right. And this is just taken from photography. And it makes such a difference to have lines straight rather than have this sort of thing. It's so distracting to the eye. So anything that's a distraction to the eye is something that takes away from presence, which is why I think it's so important. Now, I finished last time somewhere around, wait a minute, this equation. I think this equation is very important. So no, wrong. Where have we gone? Hang on, gone beyond it. There it is. And I just wanted to remind everybody about that. And I'm wondering if we're starting to get any questions coming in, because I was told I had to answer questions. But I don't see any appearing in the chat room yet, so I'll just keep rattling on unless anybody's got a question. But what we're aiming at in the relationship we build is how we create that therapeutic frame online. And I believe it's a very deliberate act. It's not just done by turning on your computer and hoping for the best. We have to think about all these things, which is why I'm disappointed to see that the other people have all got their cameras turned off, because I would be wanting to draw. So Neville, I'm afraid you're the one getting my bits, because I can see you. And drawing in my humanness, and because actually we are humans. We're two humans talking to each other via a different format than the last time we would have met in person. But you can create something that is as powerful through online, but it does require thinking about a lot. And being sure that so lots of these things they're like those swimming strokes I spoke about, but you need to pay attention to every one of those. There's going to be more as well. So I'm going to move on a little bit now, pass through some of these. We talked about disinhibition at the end of last time, and I'm going to talk to some of these. And Neville, I'm delighted to see you there, and Aisha and whoever else is present, please turn on your videos. And what I'd really like is everybody have their sound on and tell me what's wrong with number one of these pictures.
The lights overhead.
The lights overhead is one. And
she's not in the center of the screen.
She's not in the center of the screen. I'll give you a help. The camera's leaning backwards, so it's more looking at the ceiling than at her. So it's meaning that we're seeing less of her because we're looking at the ceiling. It's leaning backwards. And I think it's public space. It's an office. It's not private space. So this is a no-no. Let's load. And we're not going to do all 25. Let's pick on number 2. What's wrong with that? Well, everything. But what's the big no-no? Say that again.
The little obvious, that one, you can't even see if it's human or not. I'm not sure. It could be a moth.
It could be anything. You're quite right. That is a perfect answer. Brilliant. I really like that. And what is the big no-no of that one? There is a particular no-no that...
lights behind.
Yeah, the light's behind. Light is death for online video work. Yeah. Let's move to number 4, which is probably the least bad of all of them. What do we think about number 4?
It's very business oriented.
It's very business, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, business oriented, and he hasn't got his camera straight. You can see those lines leaning backwards. Do you know, I went to a therapist in London about 30 years ago. I won't give his name. Very eminent chap. Anyway, I couldn't ever think of a word with him to say, because I was so distracted by his picture on the wall. He had one of those, I don't know if it was Renoir or Monet, Manet, whatever their names are, but it was one of those pictures of a garden bench and lovely summer flowers in an English summer garden. And this bench had only 3 legs, I swear it. Every part of those sessions was spent with me trying in my mind to draw in the 4th leg. And this is what happens to people online. Maybe not everybody is concerned about this. But when things go wrong, instead of concentrating on the relational aspects, you're trying to straighten up that line. And this is why getting the attention to detail is so important. Let's go to number 15.
She's blurry and very far away.
Yep. And there's a third thing.
She has a door open.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a fourth thing. She's got a lamp coming out of her head.
Sticking out of her head. Yes.
Exactly.
It looks like my favorite Martian.
Exactly. And let's go to number 18.
Oh, yes.
The light behind her.
Yeah. And the camera angle is all wrong. So she's looking down at this person. So the camera must be sitting on the desk, I think. Which is the wrong place. The camera should be about 2 inches below your eye line. Mine is about 2 inches below my eye line at the moment. And I'm guessing number 4, his was about 2 inches below his eye line, because it's about right. And you're seeing a good part of him. You see, Neville, I'm seeing you well in your picture, if you know what I mean. So often I see people when they start therapy with me, or my students, all I can see is just a little head bobbing above things. It's like a fish bobbing up above the water a little bit. 22 and 23 we won't even bother to discuss. We'll just go to 25. What's 25? What's wrong with 25?
No eye contact.
No eye contact. Good one. First point. Second point.
The lines.
The lines. And why are the lines wrong? Again, it's because she's got the camera down on the desk. It's not, it needs to, because you're actually seeing the ceiling. You should not usually see much of the ceiling. I mean, if we look at ourselves, not even sure where I am on all this lot. You can't see my ceiling at all. Neville, I can't see yours, nor Aisha. And hang on, getting below. Alice, I can't see your ceiling. And Nancy, I can't see at all. But you're all beautifully framed. And I can see that Alice, for example, has thought hard about her background and is giving a very specific image. Alice, why did you choose that background?
Well, because the work that I do in parental alienation is very serious, and it can be very dark, and it's a lot about child psychological abuse. So I like to bring a lot of light into my work, because it's a very sad space a lot of the time. So I bring in a lot of candles, because I was trained for a long time by a lot of nuns, and they light candles for everything every time they want to have light come into the space. So I just turn on all my candles. That's why.
So it's a great idea. Isn't it lovely?
Thank you.
What a perfect idea. The point is, you've been very deliberate about it. This is my point. None of these 25 have been deliberate. They've just turned on their camera and continued to do the same thing as if they were in the room, but they haven't thought about it. They haven't got any self-awareness. The first point of good presence is self-awareness about how you look at. It's quite narcissistic, actually, at first, in a way, because, we never quite like looking at ourselves. We always say, we shouldn't concentrate on ourselves, but to work well online, you have to think hard about the format. Now, I haven't thought very hard this morning about my virtual reality background, this evening for you guys, but I could have done, and I could have decided to put on all manner of different backgrounds, some of which are appropriate. So somebody said, for example, let's see if I've got one to hand. Yeah, there we go. So that one, for example, I'm just going to stop the screen share so you can see me more easily. It's very office oriented again, but you can build up. So when we've been teaching children, young people, therapists. I've been amazed to see the selection of virtual reality backgrounds that they've come with in order to convey a message. And it has been one of the most moving things, really, to discover how children, young people therapists can take the digital format and transform themselves. I had about 70 CYP therapists, all who are art, movement, drama, music therapists, started as soon as lockdown happened for us in England, which was about April. And none of them wanted to be with us. They were paid for by their organisation, so they were deeply resentful. And they'll, in their personal journals on the first week of the course, said, "We don't want to be here. We think this is a shit course. It's not appropriate for our modality. Usual blah, 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 blah." Lots of negativity. Well, those, when they did their presentations, and they had the choice of what to do the presentations on, but a lot of them chose creativity. And when they did those on about week 7 of their course, oh my goodness, we tutors were in tears. They were so beautiful, so brilliant. They'd taken the technology and absolutely transformed and used the technology to the limits of its potential. And so some were coming in with 2 screens, using their iPhone to come in a second time, creating sort of virtual space using virtual reality backgrounds. There was so much. Once you take the blinkers off, there is so much that you can do to create that richness online, which is what we're trying to aim at. So what I'm wanting to say is that it's very important that that we understand it's deliberate. The whole working online has to be quite deliberate. We don't just turn it on. So I'm just now going to turn my screen share back on to go through a couple of things. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but in terms of the most modern, you know about these formats already. And oopsie, hang on, wait a minute. I've seen that one already. Email is the hardest of them and requires quite a lot of training. I would not recommend anybody does email therapy without training. Otherwise, you'll lose light hours of your life apart from anything else. But what I wanted to just talk about a little bit was some of these additional items. And I'm going to just go to some of these as enhancing presence in the Therapeutic Alliance today. I think we are arriving in a world where robots and chatbots will take up some roles in psychotherapy and counselling, CBT therapy and psychology. I don't know whether I think this is good or bad, and I think there might be a time when they are useful, and they may be useful for certain client groups. All the research about computerized ICBT, for example, Helen Reapers would be a great example. She spoke last year at the Mind Tech conference, and if you want to see any research around this, Mind Tech conference, just put in those 3 words, 2 words, Mind Tech is 1 word, London, and you'll come across all the conferences. They got fantastic research around online therapy, but it's mainly NHS driven, so mainly CBT based. So here's a surprise, not the research. I think all the research about CBT, ICBT in particular, so this is computer generated CBT, is that it works better if there's a therapist involved. This is no surprise to us, is it? But it is to the CBT profession, who thought they could just computerize CBT and that the clients would happily get along with it. And that hasn't happened. And this Helen Reapers is a good example of some of the work around games. I think games is something that's going to come out much more in therapeutic work, particularly children, young people. and arts, all the sorts of creative arts groups. And on our Academy website, we've got two pages on our website. Hang on, let me just get to, here's one I prepared a little earlier type thing. Just going to, wait a minute, I just need to come out of my presentation. There we go. Right, I want to now move to showing you some resources. I've got a couple of things ready to show you. So one of the things I want to show you, which is something you've probably never come across. Did you know, I can't remember the exact figure, but did you know there's around 400,000 health apps? Did you know that fact? And have you, you don't need to, I don't want to humiliate or show anybody up here. Have you ever used an app with clients? No. Thank you, Neville. Aisha, have you? No. Alice, I don't know if you're still with us. Well, here's the thing. Quite often, people have been told about apps, but have never used them. So rule number one of apps: never use an app unless you've used it yourself. Rule number two, if this is a rule, I'm not sure, but anyway, number two item: of all the 400 or however many thousand health apps there are about 100,000 mental health apps, most of which have never been tried and tested at a research level and we don't know if they're effective or not. Some of them could actually be dangerous. So, for example, if you put up suicide in Google as a search, you could, if you were suicidal, you could just as easily land up on one of those suicide sites that encourages you to commit suicide rather than giving you support in your suicidal feelings. So this is all very unregulated. And in the UK, in fact, the world leaders in app research and checking is a company called Orca, and they have a link with Acto. We have a link with them. And Aisha, would you like to give me what's your preferred therapy area? What interests you? Eating disorders, bereavement, trauma?
Relationships and sex therapy.
Let's go for sex therapy. Let's do. Hang on, wait a minute. Am I going to get on there? This is typical. It's all going to go slow just because I'm. Right, here we go. Sex. Let's see what comes up with sex. And this is my keep fingers crossed and hope there is something, because I haven't. So here we go. We got a whole load of things coming up, not all of which would be suitable because I just put up sex. And see, so my sex doctor. Now, there's a few things that are really useful here. This is resources to support what you're doing. So the first thing I'd say is I would rule out, as an English person working with somebody in England, I would rule out an American one, for example, because we're united by a non-common language. You know, we understand each other, but we don't speak the same language. And there's a danger culturally that would be too different. If there wasn't an English one, I'd probably go for an Australian one, because I think we're closer to Australia than we are, for example, to the States in cultural identity and things. Discuss, disagree, whatever. But you can see there's a whole load of others. I think that's a German one, so I'd probably give that a swerve as well, unless there was nothing else. So we got a few things here. So I'm just, for the sake of argument, just going to go on. If I could get my screen back up, it's all gone on go slow. Let's go to the sex doctor, if I can ever get my screen back to it, and see. So the first thing you'll see up here whilst we're waiting to get back there is we've got these percentages here. One is 70%. This is important because this is by Orca, who has researched this. So let's look at the more information. I should probably have turned off a few things ahead of time because it's going to go very slow. Right, come on. Let's just do click, see what comes up. What it will do, Orca assesses along 3 lines. Here we go. Data privacy, clinical assurance, and user experience. This is really important for your client to know that their data is held private or not. And that for the therapist to know that this has actually gone through some research testing, that it is actually works from a therapeutic point of view, and that the user is comfortable with it. Now, there's a lot more information to drill down into, and I'm not going to. This is freely available to everybody. If you go to acto-hub.org.uk, you can jump onto it. So if you just go onto go onto the Acto website, you can then go into membership resources and get to it that way. You do not have to be a member to get access to it. There's extra items if you're an Acto member. And all Australians can be Acto members. Renee is and Annette is. In fact, the Butterfly is actually an online training provider within the Acto list. So this is a terrific resource. And it'd be even more terrific if my computer wasn't deciding to go slow. So I'm going to close that one down as one resource. I want to show you another resource that's really useful in helping not just build the therapy. Yes, it does two things. It builds the therapeutic alliance, and it helps you with risk management. And this is the use of CoreNet. Now, CoreNet is a UK-based product, and if you're going to use it in Australia, you will need to have a VPN to be as if you were in the UK, because it can only be used in the UK. So, you can use it. We have people all over the world using it. Again, it's another Acto resource. And what it does, this is a client, I've only got one session on here, so there's not a lot of information. Let me just get back in. It's useful for, here we go. So there's I've just done one session, and I used, there are 4 things that come out of this that are really helpful to me. The first one is here is this is, in Acto, we train people to use Core. Because we think it's such a useful product. We bought it on behalf of our members, and they have access to it free of charge. And one of the things working online is it's really difficult to gauge risk. So in addition to all the other risk tools that you might be using, we recommend that you use CoreNet, because it might pick up stuff of questions you didn't ask. So that's one, is the risk there. And you can see this is the no risk line, which is where we're really heading. So there is a certain level of risk here. These pink items will tell me things I need to be looking out for in terms of risk. So it's really useful, because you can see that they're sort of blocked together. There are more items than that. I've just shown you the summary ones. I tend to use PHQ and GAD, which are standard NHS tools. PHQ is the personal health questionnaire. It's for depression, and the GAD is for anxiety. And the reason I use these is because if I've got clients who are in the NHS, they might have come from using these and they'll understand them. But the core scores pulls these together, and you can see they're all in a cluster, which is what I'd want to see. Now, if I'd done another session with this client, this is just a training client. So I would have more scores here, and I'd start to see an up and down score. Now, the thing that our clients tell us is they find this so useful because it gives them feedback about where they're at. So it's not for risk management, which is what we usually think about these sorts of scores for. Most of these, the core used in the UK is done on paper. It sits in filing cabinets. Clients hate doing it because it's got no relationship to them. They never see the results. It's all for some NHS scores. What is fantastic about this is I screen share this, as I am with you, so that they see the scores, and we'll go, wow, I can see that you've been really having some difficult thoughts this week. Do you want to talk about that at all? And these things can become areas of talking about. So it's not just a research tool or something to check risk, which is really important, but it's a fantastic relational tool, and it can help clients to find a way into a conversation where they might find it difficult. So I'm never suggesting, I heard the end of Neville's talk and some of the bits of things that he was talking about doing. And this is never a replacement for anything that anybody already does. This is an additional tool. And what's lovely about it is it's an online tool. So literally, let's just see if I can get a new session up. I don't know if I'm going to manage this today with the speed, but here we go. So this is my client. You'll see that you can't see their email address because it was put in at the beginning, and it's encrypted and hidden for data security. And we only ever use our ACTO numbers for numbers, so that if we're going to use it for research purposes, it's all anonymized. I will here give the format that the therapy is going to be delivered in. Let's say it's going to be in virtual reality. And then I can choose whether I'm going to do the full core one, full form. I use the full one at the beginning and at the end, and usually just 10 questions, because that's 34. You lose the will to live after a bit. Or core YP, which is for young people. I'll do the core YP. I'm not going to do any of these things, and I can either send this remotely to the client ahead of time. I usually send it 5 or 10 minutes before the session. They fill it just before the session. I bring it up, I screen share with them, and they go, wow, I can see I'm getting better. Or, oh my God, those scores have got worse. That's because my husband came home this weekend, for example. That is something I've heard said recently. So I can either click on this one for them to complete it remotely, or I can actually do it on the top one, which would give them the opportunity to complete the scores now. So let's just see what happens. And we're not going to do the whole thing, but if my computer doesn't grind to a complete halt, I will attempt to show you. There you go. You can see the beginning of how it would be. One tip I've learned. Did you see? I moved my mouse. It's an automatic activity. So when I'm training people, I say hold your mouse very still, because if I said to Neville, "Now Neville, could you answer this question for me?" And Neville went, "Oh, all the time." It might have been because I'd guided my mouse there. And that's what I was thinking he was going to say. So I'd already driven my mouse up there a little bit, getting ready to click it. And then Neville says, "Not at all." I'd be very surprised. But I've learned now to keep my mouse still until the client has answered, so that I don't give them a leading answer. I'm not leading them to say "not at all" or "all the time" or anything else. So let's just do some time and move on to the next one. And so we're not going to go any further than this, because otherwise we'll have too much going on. But I will keep my mouse. I just move it south of the next button and hold it. This is a trick I learned. Terribly important. It's just a subconscious thing that the therapist thinks, I know that Neville hasn't felt like talking to anyone this week, so I'm already driving over to this side of the answers, which leads Neville to say "all the time" or "often." But that's not fair, because that's not giving Neville the opportunity to say it. So there we go. So that's another little tool that's quite useful. The other thing that we've become aware of in ACTO, and we've done something about, which is really important, is that we've rewarded training, because I really believe that if you're to create a sense of presence with people, you need to reward training. So we've got 3 levels of membership now. Level 1, you have to have done between 80 to 100 hours since the 1st of October. Anybody before the 1st of October is in okay to level 2. But since the 1st of October, anybody applying, it's level 1 if they've got less than 100 hours, but more than 80. Level 2 is generally 100 hours or more, or an intent on that. And that includes guided learning, but there has to be elements of teaching, skills-based practice. The skills-based practice is so important. You can't just sit and talk at people. They've got to do the practice themselves. And then this is the new thing, is the level 3 senior professional member, which is great, because it means those who've got diplomas and who've really trained now get extra recognition and as senior professional members. So this is a new thing in ACTO, and I'm mentioning this because ACTO has a lot of Australians interested in joining. Butterfly is part of ACTO, and that feels pretty important. So I'm going to stop my screen share now. and just for the last few minutes, I've sort of wandered through some different areas of how you create presence that are not directly related to presence, but about how we as therapists have to be very deliberate in what we learn in order to be there for our clients. It's not all about therapeutic stuff, it's some building blocks, and you can only do the therapeutic stuff, be there with the client, to quote Sula or Rogers or anybody else, once you've got the building blocks in place. So I've been talking about building blocks today, really. Okay, I'm finished. Any questions just to finish off on? It's gone very quiet. Everybody's got their sound turned off except for David, who I can see half of. Thank you. So, in that case, it's over to you, Aisha, to finish off.
Okay, so if there's no further questions for this evening, I'd really like to thank all of our presenters today for presenting and informing us, the counselling community, about the importance of working online and, you know, all these different issues that come with counselling online. Just want to remind you all that all of the sessions have been recorded, and you'll be sent the links or information through Renee. I'm sure she'll get to you in a few days regarding that as well. So I guess with that, I'm going to stop the recording now.